Thanks for tuning in to Curious Cat, the podcast that examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. I'm your host, Jennifer Holtz. Join me every week as I explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit. Welcome to Curious Cat. This week, we are talking about seeds, not just the ones that get caught in your teeth after eating berries or roll off your poppy seed buns when you're eating a Chicago dog. All seeds, what they are, how they disperse, the special vault of world seeds, and more. I hope as you maybe shop for seeds, sow seeds in your pea patch, or wherever you come about seeds, that you look at these little bits with a tad more reverence after this episode. Let's get into it. Let's start with some Seeds 101. I thought this answer to Alice from a scientist was a pretty perfect Seeds 101 from the Conversations column titled Curious Kids. Alice, age 6, from Beverly, UK, wrote in to ask, where did the first seed come from? Hi, Alice. This is a clever question. As I'm sure you know, plants use seeds to spread their young and make new plants. But plants haven't always used seeds to do this. Seeds came together bit by bit over a really long time as plants evolved. To understand how this happened, you need to know that all living things change slowly over time to get better at surviving in their environment. This process is called evolution. Here's how it works. When a living thing has a feature which works well, it will be able to live longer and have more young. These young will probably have similar features thanks to their parents. Plants started using seeds to spread their young somewhere between 385 million and 365 million years ago. Before seeds existed, plants had other ways of doing this. Back then, most plants used spores. Some plants today, such as algae, mosses, and ferns, still do. You might have spotted the tiny brownish dots on the underside of a fern leaf. These are spores. Spores are different from seeds in a few ways. A spore is made of just one part, a single cell, while a seed contains many cells, each with different jobs to do. Another difference is that spores only have one parent plant, while seeds have two. This means that after a seed starts sprouting, it can grow into a plant just like its parents. But spores have to work a little bit harder. Once they've traveled away from their parent plant, they grow into a little green plate of cells, which scientists call gametophyte. Then, two gametophytes must join together before they can grow into a plant. It's easier for gametophytes to join together when it's wet, and that's why plants that use spores usually need to grow in wet places. And now my mind is blown because that's like Seattle and ferns and moss. For example, they say horsetails are a very ancient type of plant which like to grow along lakes, rivers, and ponds. They have very strange spores with 4 legs, which help them to move and travel further away. So let's get back to the first seed. Scientists believe that an extinct seed fern called Elxinia polymorpha was the first plant to use seeds. This plant had cup-like features called cupples that would protect the developing seed. These couples grew along the plant's branches. Today, plants with seeds do things a little bit differently. There are 2 main types, angiosperms and gymnosperms. Angiosperms are flowering plants. Their seeds develop inside of fruit like apples, tomatoes, or even rose hips, or even holly berries. Gymnosperms, such as pine trees, grow their seeds inside a hard cone. The upside of seeds have evolved because they are better at helping plants to survive than those spores are. For example, seeds contain a food source to help the new plant grow. They also have a hard coating, which helps them to live longer in different conditions. This means plants with seeds can live in lots of different places, from high, hot, dry deserts to cool, rainy places. Seeds are so good at helping plants to spread their young that most plant species on Earth today use seeds. One thing they didn't cover is the way seeds are dispersed. So I had to look into it. I found an answer to this question from NYBG Mertz Library Reference. Asked, how do plants disperse their seeds? The librarian Anita Finkel wrote, the Science Learning Hub of New Zealand offers this excellent answer to that question. Plants cannot walk around and take their seeds to other places, so they have developed other methods to disperse or move their seeds. The most common methods are wind, water, animals, explosion, and fire. Wind dispersal. Have you ever blown on a dandelion head and watched the seeds float away? This is wind dispersal. Seeds from plants like dandelions, swan plants, and cottonwood trees are light, and they have these feathery bristles that can be carried long distances by the wind. Some plants like corey and maple trees have winged seeds. They don't float away but flutter to the ground. With wind dispersal, the seeds are simply blown about and land in all kinds of places. To help their chances that at least some of the seeds land in a place suitable for growth, these plants have to produce lots of seeds. Okay, that's still from the article, but I'm going to go ahead and interject because my brain is kind of blown. The two things that they mentioned, blowing on a dandelion head and those little, we called them helicopters as kids, the twirly whirlies that come down from the maple trees. Both of those to me in my childhood, and I wonder if yours too, are associated with trying to make a wish. With the helicopter seeds, we always said make a wish before it hit the ground and it would be granted. And with the dandelion seeds, we blew on it, making a wish into the wind. And the seeds were like our wish being thrown into the wind, cast a spell, that kind of thing. That I don't know. I wonder if it's within our DNA strand to help seeds to disperse. And that's why we've added magic to them, because they are little pockets of magic. But anyway, back to the article. Water dispersal. Many plants have seeds that use water as a means of dispersal. The seeds float away from a parent plant. Many aquatic plants and plants that live near water have seeds that can float and are carried by water. Plants living along streams and rivers have seeds that float downstream and therefore are able to germinate at new sites. The size of the seed is not a factor in determining or not whether a seed can float. Some very large seeds, think of coconuts, can float. Some small seeds also float. Animal dispersal. Okay, that's a great next jump. Birds often fly far away from the parent plant and disperse the seeds in their droppings. Some seeds have hooks or barbs that catch onto that animal's fur or feathers or skin. Plants like Pittosporum have sticky seeds that can be carried away by birds. Humans can also spread seeds if they get stuck to our clothing or our shoes, and if we throw fruit pips and stones out of the car window. Fire dispersal. Okay, this one fascinates me. There are some species, a division used on the Linnaean system of classification or taxonomy. This is a group of living organisms that can interbreed to produce viable offspring of pine tree that require the heat from a fire before their cones will open and release seeds. Wow, my mind is blown. The intensity and timing of the fire is important. It needs to be hot enough to trigger the cones to open, but if fires are too frequent, there's not enough time for the plants to grow big enough to make new seeds. But what if a comet strikes Earth and we're all wiped out? What happens to our rich diversity of seeds? Well, we may be extinct, but worry not. The seeds will survive thanks to an international effort to store seeds in a vault beneath the ice of the Arctic. Called the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, the Seed Vault safeguards duplicates of 1,300,000 seed samples from almost every country globally, with room for millions more. Its purpose is to back up genobank collections to secure the foundation of our future food supply. So why do we need a global seed vault? Worldwide, more than 1,700 gene banks hold collections of food crops for safekeeping, yet many of these are vulnerable, exposed not only to natural catastrophes and war, but also to avoidable disasters, such as a lack of funding or poor management. Something as mundane as a poorly functioning freezer can ruin an entire collection, and the loss of a crop variety is as irreversible as an extinction of an animal or a dinosaur or any other form of life. The seed vault stores duplicates or backups of seed samples from the world's crop collections as a safeguard against such catastrophic loss. I'm so sorry. I'm distracted because the neighbor is mowing their lawn, which feels appropriate for a seed-based podcast episode. So pardon the mowing in the background. So how does it work? From their website, the Seed Vault is the ultimate insurance policy for the world's food supply, securing millions of seeds representing every important crop available in the world today, and offering options for future generations to overcome the challenges of climate change and population growth. A temperature of negative 18 Celsius is required for optimal storage of the seeds. Permafrost and thick rock ensure that the seed samples will remain frozen even without power. The seeds are sealed in custom-made 3-ply foil packages, which are sealed inside boxes and stored on shelves inside the seed vault. This low temperature and the low moisture levels inside the seed vault ensure low metabolic activity, keeping the seeds viable for long periods of time. So why here? Why Svalbard? This is the farthest north a person can fly on a scheduled flight, offering a remote location that is nevertheless accessible. While the entrance may be visible, the seed vault itself is more than 100 meters into the mountain. The area is geologically stable and humidity levels are low. The seed vault is well above sea level, protected from ocean flooding according to the worst case scenario sea level changes. And finally, the permafrost offers the seed vault natural freezing, providing a cost-effective and fail-safe method to conserve the seeds. Oh, and by the way, this is me again. I've linked to the Crop Trust recipe for vegan lentil and hemp seed meatballs in hemp seed curry in the show notes. And oh my God, it looks fantastic. And as I was adding the link, I saw another recipe on their site for sunchoke soup, and I added that link as well. Oh my God, I must be hungry. Preserved and forgotten in England almost 2 centuries ago, there are zombie seeds that have sprouted. Yeah, I know it sounds like a subplot to Fear the Walking Dead, but it's not, I swear. Live Science reports, quote, mysterious hybrid species discovered hiding among 144-year-old zombie seeds from secretive experiment. The subhead explains more. Scientists participating in one of the longest-running active scientific experiments have discovered a surprising hybrid plant hiding among seeds, buried at a secret location on a university campus since 1829. In 1829, botanist William Beale buried 20 glass pint bottles, each filled with wet sand and 50 seeds belonging to 23 species of weeds at an unknown location at Michigan State University. Beale's goal was to discover how long the seeds could remain viable by digging up the bottles years later to see if the seeds would germinate or grow into plants. He hoped to discover how long dormant seeds beneath agricultural fields could pose a threat to farmers if they were dredged up by the plow. To start with, Beale dug up a bottle every 5 years, but then in 1920, after the first 8 bottles had been unearthed and the seeds showed high rates of germination success, Beale's successors decided to prolong the experiment by digging up a bottle every 10 years. In 1980, the interval was extended to 20 years as seeds continued to germinate. The location of Beale's bottles has remained a closely guarded secret, passed down from researcher to researcher to avoid anyone interfering with the project. In 2021, researchers dug up the 16th bottle and, as with previous iterations of the experiment, some of the buried plants exceeded. Oh my God, what a bad pun. Exceeded expectations and germinated once again. This is their pun, not mine. These seeds are like zombies that can hang out in the soil for incredibly long periods of time, seemingly dead and then suddenly germinate, said project researcher Marjorie Weber, who is a professor in plant biology at MSU. And she said that in a statement after the seeds were last dug up. But in the latest follow-up study published October 9th in the American Journal of Botany, the team discovered that the 16th bottle contained a hybrid, or a genetic mix of 2 different species, Okay, so one was known to be part of the experiment, and I'm going to try to pronounce it. It's Verbascum thapsus, and the other one, Verbascum blattaria, was deliberately not included in the bottles. The V. thapsus and the V. blattaria mix was revealed via DNA analysis, which would have surprised and amazed Beale, since DNA was unknown at the time the bottles were buried. Researchers wrote this in a new statement. The researchers are still unsure exactly how the hybrid was created, but Beale likely mistook the seed for a regular V. thapsus seed when he was filling the bottles. Okay, because I kept thinking of Jurassic Park where they'll find a way, right? Okay, but back to the article. Verbascum seeds are one of the few species that are still able to germinate. The rest of them stop germinating after a few decades. The team hopes that it will continue to germinate when the next bottle is unearthed. It is still a little early to put it on my calendar, but I'm looking forward to seeing if we can wake up any more seeds in 2040. Project researcher David Lowry, a professor in plant biology at MSU, said in the newest statement. With just 4 bottles remaining, the researchers may have to further increase the intervals between their digs to prolong the experiment. The Beale experiment will ultimately end when we run out of bottles, Lowry said. If seeds germinate again from our next dig, we may need to consider extending the time between bottle extractions to every 30 years. The article written by Harry Baker is linked for you in the show notes. After cleaning out my garage recently and finding seed packets that had to be more than a decade old, I got to thinking, what's the oldest viable seed that's ever been found? Luckily, Wikipedia had an answer. There have been several seeds known at different times as the oldest viable seed. Dormancy allows seeds to survive for extended periods, as we saw in the experiment we just talked about. That can aid in seed dispersal and spread out the growth and establishment of seedlings, increasing the likelihood that some of the next generation survive if conditions are not suitable for seeding establishment. Over time, the seeds lose viability, which is the ability to initiate metabolic activity, cellular growth, and germination. Seeds have many cells and tissues that die over time, and these deaths can be delayed or increased by environmental conditions the seed experiences. Very generally, small seeds, especially from weedy species and annuals, are more likely to remain viable in the soil longer than larger perennial seeds. The seeds of some aquatic plants also may remain viable longer in mud because their viability is aided by the aquatic environment, which remains cool and moist. The oldest viable seed that has grown into a full plant was an about 2,000-year-old Judean date palm seed rediscovered from excavations at Herod the Great's palace on Masada in Israel. It had been preserved in a cool, dry place, not by freezing. It was germinated in 2005. By the way, this plant resembles one of those lovely palm trees you can buy at Home Depot. It's not, but you know what I'm talking about in their interior plant area. Or they have a pretty convincing fake version at IKEA. And while you're there, you can wolf down a plate of meatballs. I feel like meatballs is like a subtopic of this episode. Again, I interrupted myself. Live Science had these additional facts about this 2,000-year-old seed. Quote, the new sapling was sprouted from a 2,000-year-old date palm excavated in Masada, the site of a cliffside fortress in Israel, where ancient Jews are said to have killed themselves to avoid capture by Roman invaders. Dubbed the Methuselah tree after the oldest person in the Bible, the new plant has been growing steadily, and after 26 months, the tree was nearly 4 feet tall. The second oldest viable seed recorded, in case you're wondering, is the carbon-14 dated 1,300-year-old sacred lotus, recovered from a dry lake bed in northeastern China in 1995. This plant looks like a cross between a dahlia and a water lily. It is absolutely gorgeous. Armed with all this information, I think I'm going to dig out those old seeds in the garage that I found from the trash bin. Here are a couple other anecdotal stories from Wikipedia I've got to share before we close. In December 2009, a Turkish newspaper reported a claim that a 4,000-year-old lentil had been successfully germinated. In 1954, Arctic lupin seeds belonging to the species Lupinus arctos were found in the Yukon Territory in glacial sediments, believed to be at least 10,000 years old. The seeds were germinated in 1966. Later, new dating techniques revealed that they were likely modern seeds, so less than 10 years old, contamination that came from an ancient rodent burrow. There was a persistent myth that seeds from ancient Egyptian tombs were viable. The myth was reportedly started by scam artists that were selling quote-unquote miracle seeds designed to capitalize on Europeans' Egyptomania of the 1800s. In 1897, the claims were tested by the British Museum's director of Egyptian antiquities. His name was E.A. Wallace Budge. Budge provided genuine 3,000-year-old tomb grains of wheat to the director of the Royal Botanic Gardens in Kew, William Thisden Dyer, to plant under controlled conditions. The test results, they resulted in none of them germinating. There's an entire segment of scientists endeavoring to protect and preserve ancient seeds. I found an article by Ancient Origins on the topic. Fascinating. Links are in the show notes. Titled, Quest to Find Ancient Seeds and Bring Them to Life Before They Are Lost to History. The author writes, the drive to bring extinct animal species back from the dead, such as the woolly mammoth or saber-toothed tiger, is picking up speed as genetics and biotechnology science advances. But animals are not the only life in danger of disappearing forever. Botanists, historians, and plant genetics experts now work to restore and retain endangered plants and seeds which may be lost forever. Dr. Frederick Wiseman, retired professor and expert on ethnobotany, spent years researching and working with the Mayan civilization in Guatemala and Mexico. But for the past 2 decades, he's turned his attention to the plight of plants native to his homeland, Vermont, in the United States. According to the daily newspaper Press Republican, Wiseman now works to identify and preserve ancient seeds which were vital to the Abenaki Native Americans of northeastern North America. The history of the indigenous plants reveal a wealth of information which would otherwise have been lost to time. He has reportedly traced 26 different varieties, including corn, beans, squash, Jerusalem artichoke, ground cherries, and tobacco. There was a huge wellspring of unrecorded agricultural information. The tribes were doing all types of agriculture that was recorded by early explorers in the Northeast. Some people were raising crops that were basically unknown to science, Wiseman tells the Press Republican. Wiseman, of Abenaki ancestry himself, gives presentations on his work, Chasing Seeds, the Discovery and Restoration of Ancient Wabanaki Crops, at the Vermont Archaeology Heritage Center. The Vermont Archaeology Heritage Center writes of their, quote, Seeds of Renewal project, reporting it has developed a complex strategy to recover the produce raised and consumed by the Vermont Abenakis and their relatives in Maine, Quebec, and the Canadian Maritimes. In addition to multiple cultivated varieties of the so-called Three Sisters of corn, beans, and squash, the project recovered more unusual ancient crops such as husk tomatoes, sunflowers, gourds, and tobacco. The struggle to locate and preserve specimens, and especially to repopulate an endangered plant, has successes and failures, Wiseman notes. In his search for the Norwich Walk bean, a bean from an Abenaki village in Maine, destroyed in 1724 by a British attack, Wiseman connected online with an agronomy teacher who had a few seeds. But seed collection takes up so many resources that it leaves little time for studying the samples, and the beans haven't yet been planted. In another case of seed rescue, Wiseman sourced a few samples of the rare East Montpelier squash. He tells the Press Republican, the seeds grew but did not at all look like the picture that she sent. We were completely devastated. She gave some other seeds to friends of hers in Orange, Vermont. They grew it out and it looked exactly like what we were expecting. The bad news was the couple who was raising them didn't realize how valuable it was and grew it in a field with blue Hubbard squash, which is the same species. The blue Hubbard had cross-pollinated with the rare East Montpelier, and the produce that remained were hybrids, leaving fewer original uncrossed seeds. It's over the edge of extinction right now, and we're going to try to pull it back, Wiseman says. Fred Wiseman is not alone in his quest to preserve ancient seeds. Botanical researcher Elaine Soloway has nurtured more than 100 rare or near-extinct species back to life as part of a 10-year project to study plants and herbs used as ancient cures. She has grown plants and herbs used in Tibetan, Chinese, and biblical medicine, as well as traditional folk remedies from other cultures to see whether their effectiveness can be scientifically proven. Leading plant scientists have argued that the idea of resurrecting ancient plants is a very good one. For example, they have suggested that a variety of ancient North American grains should be revived. Frederick Longen of the University of Hohenheim in Germany has suggested that the time is right, partially due to an increased demand for traditional grains. People are interested in biodiversity, in getting with more taste, with healthier ingredients, and ancient grains deliver interesting things. Furthermore, the resurrection of ancient grains would increase agricultural biodiversity and create hardier plants, or or at least provide varieties which could balance each other out due to different strengths and weaknesses. 3 varieties they've proposed for a revival are spelt, einkorn, and emmer. For now, Wiseman and others will continue their search to restore ancient seeds with an aim to preserve not only the plants themselves, but the history and the cultures which relied on such natural wealth. The struggle to do so continues, aided in part by more open communication and advancing technologies. It's an emerging science, Wiseman tells Press Republican. It's pretty raw and undigested. I guess we've decided it's worth saving those old packets of seeds, but the paper packets that are holding those seeds in my garage, they're falling apart. I might slip them into a recycled jar to keep the seeds intact until next spring. Not the most novel way to store seeds, though, as this article from Live Science explains. From 2024, the article is titled, "Romans Kept Poisonous Narcotic Seeds Concealed in Bone Vials. New Discovery Reveals." Author Jennifer Nalowicki explains, a hollowed out animal bone was used by Romans to store a stash of poisonous seeds and is the first ever evidence of the seeds used during the Roman era. Nearly 2,000 years ago, someone used a hollowed out piece of bone as a container for storing hundreds of poisonous seeds. Archaeologists found the carved out animal femur or thigh bone, which likely came from a goat or sheep, at a rural Roman period settlement in what is now the Netherlands. Prior to this discovery in 2017, there had been no physical evidence of this plant being used by people in the Roman Empire, according to a statement. The tiny seeds come from the black henbane, a highly poisonous plant from the nightshade family. Henbane has long been prized for its medicinal properties and hallucinogenic effects, according to a new study published in the April issue of the journal Antiquity. Researchers have found similar seeds scattered at archaeological sites across Europe dating back to 5500 BC. However, it's often challenging to determine whether the presence of black henbane at these sites indicates it was used or appeared naturally as the plant grows like a weed. Since the plant can grow naturally in and around settlements, its seeds can end up in archaeological sites naturally without intervention by humans, says study lead author Maike Groot. No, not that Groot, a zoo archaeologist at the Free University of Berlin, said in the statement. Archaeologists determined that the seeds were deliberately placed inside the bone, which measured a little shy of 3 inches long. To ensure their safekeeping, someone had sealed the vessel using a plug made out of black birch bark. Researchers dated the bone to sometime between AD 700 and 100, based on the styles of ceramics and a wire brooch found in the same muddy pit. This is the first known instance of the seeds being deliberately stored for later use. I can't help but think of ID Network and 48 Hours. And was this our first premeditated murder? Or does the one at the La Brea tar pits precede it? I'm not really sure. Anyway, the article goes on. The find is unique and provides unmistakable proof for the intentional use of black henbane seeds in the Roman Netherlands, Groot said. The seeds support earlier classical literature claiming that black henbane was used during the Roman period, although these sources suggest it was used medicinally and wasn't considered a recreational drug, according to the study. For instance, Roman author and naturalist Pliny the Elder, who lived from AD 23 to 79, wrote that the seeds could cause, quote, insanity and giddiness, end quote, according to the study. Our study contributes to the discussion of how to distinguish between a weed that naturally ended up in an archaeobotanical assemblage and a plant intentionally used by people, Groot said. We argue that future finds of black henbane should be studied by taking into account the context of the find and its relation to other medicinal plants. Thanks for listening to Curious Cat. Be sure to tune in after the music because there's another installment of the Curious Q coming your way. Until next week, stay curious. I love you. It's time for the Curious Q, a quick rundown of the week's weirdest headlines. We are nearing October, the official kickoff to spooky season. In that spirit, I couldn't resist the joke. I have collected some ghostly stories and trivia for this week's Q. The ghost that Capone couldn't shake. Our first story, titled The Ghost That Capone Couldn't Shake, and it reads, among the victims of the 1929 St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Chicago, when Al Capone's gang was believed to have assassinated 7 men connected to Bugs Moran's North Side gang, was James Clark, Moran's brother-in-law. 2 years later, Capone pled guilty to tax evasion and prohibition-related charges. While serving his sentence at Alcatraz Prison in San Francisco Bay, Capone began to believe he was being haunted by Clark's ghost. Other prisoners would hear Capone supposedly alone in his cell, talking quietly to or screaming at somebody named Jimmy. Some believe these hauntings were part of what accelerated Capone's already decaying mental state. Even after Capone was released, he kept seeing Jimmy, the ghost who just could not stay away from the man who had him killed. Next up, Bangor Fort. This 16th century fort in the northern Indian state of Rajasthan is a picturesque and deserted ruin today, not because it once fell to an enemy army, but because of a broken promise. Legend has it that when the fort was being built, a sadhu or holy man who lived on the hill where the fort was being built asked that it not block the sun from his house. When the fort was finished, it threw shadows on the sadhu's home. This apparently led to the sadhu cursing the entire structure, causing it to fall into ruin and be haunted by ghosts. Here are a few strange ghost laws still in the books to this day, although for the most part, common law in the United States does not take a stand on ghosts. There are laws in some states that obligate sellers of homes to inform prospective buyers if a crime or death took place there. The idea being that people may not want to live in the conjuring house, for example. These are the laws in a couple states I pulled. California. Sellers have to tell a buyer if there's been a death on the property in the past 3 years, because apparently if it took place 4 or more years ago, the ghost has left. New Jersey. Sellers need to answer truthfully if the buyer asks about the presence of ghosts, but they're not obligated to say anything if they're not asked. And from New York, if sellers benefit from a property being inhabited by a ghost, for example, by making it into a haunted house with real ghoul credibility, they are obligated to disclose that fact to a buyer. The Hollywood Forever Cemetery on Santa Monica Boulevard is the subject of a great Father John Misty song that you should add to your playlist, but it's also, true to its name, a repository for the remains of many of Tinseltown's most legendary people, along with more storied residents like Douglas Fairbanks, Cecil B. DeMille, Peter Lorre, are some less tangible denizens. A spirit dressed in black is often seen mourning at the crypt of silent film icon Rudolph Valentino, possibly the ghost of the real Lady in Black, a woman who used to visit Valentino's final resting place every year to pay her respects. Let's turn to fetch. Not as in stop trying to make fetch a thing. No, The fetch I'm speaking about is a cross between a ghost and a doppelganger, a kind of wispy echo of a person who is still alive. Those wraith-like entities often appear in English folklore and are seen only briefly, don't say or do anything, and are considered a portent of bad things to come. In one of the more famous fetch tales, Queen Elizabeth I was shocked to see what looked to be her own corpse on her bed. Not long afterward, she died. And one final quote to round out the stories. I looked at the cracked high ceiling and really didn't know who I was for about 15 strange seconds. I wasn't scared. I was just somebody else, some stranger. And my whole life was a haunted life, the life of a ghost. And that came from Jack Kerouac, On the Road. Thanks for tuning in. Catch the headlines next week on the Curious Q. Until then, stay curious and keep it weird. I love you.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you looking for a new podcast that appeals to your scientific curiosity, but is also a little bit spooky?
Show me how I died in a past life.
Well, look no further, because this cat is where it's at.
He had concerns about the ethics surrounding AI, feeling they had achieved consciousness.
Curious Cat Podcast examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. Listen every week with your host, Jennifer Holtz, as she and her guests explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit.
We were healing karma together. They were all kind of predestined to resolve something.
Listen on all your favorite streaming apps and continue the conversation on Twitter at CuriousCatPodCA, or find Jennifer and all her links at Jennifer L. Holtz, spelled HOTES.com.